Democratic attorneys general from 16 states, spearheaded by New York and Massachusetts, launched a significant legal challenge against the Trump administration on Friday. This lawsuit stems from the administration's controversial decision to cancel millions of dollars in National Institutes of Health, NIH, grants designated for crucial medical research. The move has sparked widespread outrage among states that rely heavily on these funds to drive innovation, create jobs, and advance public health initiatives. The coalition of states argues that the abrupt termination of these grants is not only unjustified but also unlawful, threatening the progress of groundbreaking medical studies that millions of Americans depend on for hope and healing. Back in March, the NIH began a systematic rollback of funding for research projects that had already been approved, targeting areas such as diversity, equity and inclusion (DI), LGBTQ health disparities, and vaccine hesitancy studies. The agency justified these cancellations by claiming that the projects no longer aligned with its current priorities. However, the NIH failed to provide clear definitions of what constitutes misalignment or detailed explanations of how these specific projects fell short of the agency's new standards. This lack of transparency has fueled accusations of political interference in scientific research, with critics arguing that the Trump administration is prioritizing ideology over evidence-based progress. The lawsuit, filed in the U.S. District Court for the District of Massachusetts, takes aim at what the states describe as an abrupt, unjustified, and illegal decision to revoke these funds. It also challenges the NIH's broader suspension of its grant approval process, which has left countless research proposals in limbo. For states like Massachusetts, which prides itself as the medical research capital of the nation, the stakes could not be higher. Attorney General Andrea Joy Campbell emphasized the critical role NIH funding plays in her state, noting that public research institutions depend on these grants not only for cutting-edge discoveries but also for job creation and maintaining academic competitiveness. Beyond economics, she stressed that Massachusetts residents rely on these studies to develop life-saving medical advancements that address pressing public health challenges. Under federal law, the NIH is tasked with distributing the majority of its budget through grants to external institutions, supporting scientific research and training nationwide. Historically, this process has been a cornerstone of America's leadership in medical innovation. However, since January, the Trump administration has allegedly undertaken a concerted and multi-pronged effort to disrupt this system. According to the lawsuit, the administration has imposed sweeping delays in reviewing and approving grant applications that would otherwise be funded, while simultaneously terminating a significant number of already issued grants. These actions have created a ripple effect, stalling projects that were poised to address some of the most urgent health issues facing the country. The 16 states involved in the lawsuit collectively represent billions of dollars in pending research funding requests. This includes millions tied to projects that had already received preliminary approval from NIH reviewers, only to be halted by the administration's intervention. The NIH grant review process is typically rigorous and multi-layered, beginning with a study section of subject matter experts who evaluate the scientific merit of each proposal. This is followed by an advisory council review that weighs funding availability and agency priorities. Since the start of the year, however, the administration has thrown this process into disarray by canceling scheduled meetings of both review bodies and postponing future sessions indefinitely. The result is a bottleneck that threatens to derail years of planning and preparation by researchers across the country. In response, the states are asking the courts to intervene decisively. Their lawsuit seeks not only the restoration of the canceled grant funding but also a mandate requiring the federal government to adhere to lawful procedures in future funding decisions. The legal action names the NIH and its director, Jay Bhattacharya, as defendants, alongside the Department of Health and Human Services and its secretary, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. The inclusion of high-profile figures underscores the gravity of the dispute and its potential implications for the intersection of science and politics in the United States. This lawsuit is not an isolated effort. Earlier this week, a separate but related case was filed in Massachusetts by a coalition of health researchers, unions, and other stakeholders affected by the funding cuts. Given the overlapping jurisdiction, legal experts anticipate that the two cases may be consolidated, amplifying the pressure on the Trump administration to justify its actions. The convergence of these lawsuits in Massachusetts, a state with a storied history of medical innovation, highlights the symbolic and practical importance of the fight to preserve NIH funding. New York Attorney General Letitia James, a prominent voice in the coalition, condemned the administration's approach in a strongly worded statement. She accused the Trump administration of once again placing political agendas ahead of public health, jeopardizing the lives and livelihoods of millions of Americans. James pointed to the critical role that research institutions play in developing treatments and cures for diseases that devastate families daily, from cancer to chronic illnesses. Her remarks echo a broader sentiment among the state's leaders, that the cancellation of NIH grants represents a reckless gamble with the nation's health and future. The implications of this legal battle extend far beyond the courtroom. For researchers, the funding cuts have already disrupted projects that were years in the making, forcing layoffs, halting experiments, and delaying publications. For patients, the stakes are even higher, as the loss of these studies could slow progress toward new therapies and interventions. States like Massachusetts and New York, which host some of the world's leading research universities and hospitals, argue that the ripple effects will be felt for generations if the administration's policies are allowed to stand unchecked. As the lawsuit moves forward, it promises to shine a spotlight on the Trump administration's broader approach to science and public health. Critics contend that the targeting of DEI, LGBTQ health, and vaccine hesitancy research reflects a pattern of ideological bias that undermines objective inquiry. Supporters of the administration, meanwhile, may argue that the NIH's priorities should evolve to reflect new national goals. Whatever the outcome, the case is poised to set a precedent for how federal agencies balance political directives with their statutory obligations to advance human knowledge and well-being. For now, the coalition of 16 states stands united in its demand for accountability and restoration. Their lawsuit is a bold assertion that science should not be a casualty of partisan politics, and that the pursuit of medical progress must remain a shared national priority. As the courts prepare to weigh in, the nation watches closely, aware that the decision could shape the trajectory of American research and the health of its people for years to come.